Let's roll. So welcome to Title Tuesdays. Today's topic is remote online notarization, or what you guys have probably heard in the industry around in conversations, the acronym of RON, right? So for those who are new to our meetings each Tuesday, just as a background, the mission of Title Tuesdays is to provide a weekly coaching call for realtors. And we've also had some lender partners. I mean, we've had some financial planners. We have all type of real estate professionals that come into our room. So I guess it's not necessarily just for realtors, but it was intended to be a coaching call for realtors to discuss the latest trends and need to know information to help grow your business. Now, the motivation for Title Tuesday is I get a lot of questions, obviously not just as a real estate attorney, but and also a closing attorney. I'm also a real estate professional, as most of you know, and I get a lot of questions that sometimes when the realtor colleagues think that it is the end of the road, like, oh, my deal is dead. There's no way we can work around this. And so one of the mantras that I always discuss with the realtors is, listen, when you encounter an issue that impedes your forward progress, you've not reached a dead end. You have simply reached the extent of your knowledge. Everything is figure outable. I promise you, there is generally always an answer. There's always a solution to your real estate issue or hurdle. 9.99999 times out of 10, there is a resolve. I have not met one yet that was not able to be resolved. It may take a little bit of time, it may take a little bit of money. That's one thing we always say, but there is always a resolve. And so ideally, at the end of the day, the motivation of Title Tuesdays is to allow you to earn more, learn more to earn more, right? So again, as you encounter these different issues, you won't think that you've hit a dead end. You won't think that there's no way for you to keep this deal on track or to get to closing. Come to us, come each week, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to gain some information that'll allow you to find a workaround or resolve to whatever issue you might be experiencing. So for those who are not familiar with Title Xperts, this is your first time on the call, we welcome you. A brief introduction to Title Xperts. It is an attorney founded and operated title insurance and settlement firm. We are operated and managed by attorneys. We do believe that we provide the epitome of a 5-star closing experience. As I indicated, as a realtor myself, Title Xperts is built on what I saw in the industry as was needed for real estate professionals, and hopefully to provide that service that will allow the realtors to provide a 5-star closing experience to their clients and to them themselves, right? You guys are busy. We're hoping that we could be a partner the way we operate in your closing processes. We love to work with you. For those who we had not had the opportunity to work with, this is our contact information. We send new contracts to contracts@titlexperts.com. We send general closing questions to closings@titlexperts.com. And because we close all of Florida, we do have an 800 number, 8665-Xperts, where you can reach our main office and many of our other our local offices. So again, if we have not had a chance to work with you, we welcome and we look forward to the opportunity to work with you. A little bit about myself. My name is Rachel Jackson. My background provides, as you see on the screen, I do have a bachelor's in criminology from the University of Florida. If you've attended before, you know I always say, what? Go Gators. And if you are a Seminole, schedule your own Zoom and say go Noles. But on this one, it is go Gators all day long. I did obtain my Juris Doctorate from Santa Clara University School of Law in California. Returned back to Florida, Miami specifically, and obtained my LLM in Real Property Development from the University of Miami School of Law. So we have a asterisk, go Canes. And I am a licensed Florida real estate sales professional. All right, so we are all things Florida here. So today's topic, today's possible hurdle that we want to address is remote online notarization. And so the reason for this is what's the usual problem, right? Like, oh my God, my sellers are stuck in Hawaii, or my sellers will not be available for closing, or my buyer is not available. How can we get their documents notarized? This is what the advent of remote online notarization, right? And so what are the benefits of remote online notarization, or RON as I'm going to call it? Because if I try to say remote online notarization every time on every slide, I will be tongue tied and exhausted. So we are calling it RON. And so what are the benefits of RON? The benefits of RON are exactly what I'm sure you guys have heard of, and it is because you're able to sign from anywhere, right? With a digital closing is what it's called. Home buyers and sellers have the option to securely sign real estate documents from any location or even while traveling, right? Digital closings, they are typically shorter than in-person closings, they are, and they can be scheduled at more flexible times. What does that mean? The runs that we've conducted, sometimes they're late in the evening, right? Sometimes they're early in the morning, because of the fact that similarly, if you jump on a Zoom, you don't have all the prep requirements. You can just jump on your run, can sign your documents at any time a notary is available, right? Now, for the purposes of today's conversation, it's obviously you guys are not going to necessarily be conducting runs, but it's important for you to have an understanding, a background understanding of how RON works, so that if you're ever in a position where you have a client, a buyer or seller that's going to participate in a RON closing, you're able to have this discussion with them about what the process looks like, as well as anticipate any potential issues that your client may be having with this process. So with an online closing, or RON closing, your clients are going to come into what's called an online closing room. The same way we are here on Zoom, where they're going to see each other on camera. They're going to see the notary on camera. They're going to see witnesses, or the documents require witnesses on camera, obviously in lieu of meeting in person. Now they're going to access, similar to you accessing the Zoom call, they're going to access the closing room either on a laptop or a cell phone. And the cell phone must be able to make video calls. So it cannot be a flip phone, right? So your client, they got to understand they have to have some pretty, they have to have updated technology. Can't be a flip phone, can't be a laptop that doesn't have a camera or microphone. There must be video and audio, two ways, what they call two-way video and audio capability in order to conduct a closing. Understand that for security purposes, the closing is also recorded. Here's a point I want to make, and I always say this. Online closings are not Zoom. We don't just jump on, and they're certainly not FaceTime, right? Your client is not going to grab their iPhone, and just put the phone in front of themselves and show the notary that they're signing their documents. It is a much more secure protocol, and it has many more requirements to it than your simple Zoom call or FaceTime. I always say Ron is not FaceTime, right? So that's a way to even explain it to your clients when they say, well, what about this online signing? And it's certainly not DocuSign. You guys are probably familiar with DocuSign. It has similar functionality. And we're actually about to talk about that now, about how the documents are signed, but the security protocol is way different. So how are the documents assigned? The documents are signed with a click, right? So rather than a wet signature, or even writing their signatures on the screen with their finger, the documents are simply signed via your buyer or seller using a single click, similar to DocuSign, on preset signature lines, right? And so this is why it's important that there is prior planning for remote or RON signings, because the notary has to receive those documents and place the signature lines on the documents, similar to what you guys do in DocuSign, before the signing. The signing cannot, the notary cannot receive the documents when it's time to sign. You go into the signing room and they say, here are my documents. Those signature lines are preset, and the buyer or seller, whomever the signer may be, will click on each line for a preset signature, right? Now, I'm going to take you behind the scenes with a couple of screenshots so you can see what this looks like on your client's digital closing. So on the day of your client's digital closing, your client will take these 3 steps in general. Now, for those of you who have worked with us before, you do know that we use an online portal for our closings, Qualia, right? And so a lot of our communications with you all, if we worked with you before, are through a portal for the purposes of security, for the purposes of real-time updates, for the purposes of easy access to information concerning the timeline of the closing, as well as document sharing. You know that you have a portal where you have access to the closing documents that we need, those that have been provided. You know that you can go into the portal and communicate with us. So similarly, when our office conducts a RON closing, we're conducting that RON closing through that same portal that you use and your clients currently use to communicate with us, right? So there's no other place for them to go. So we keep everything in one single place. So the first step that the buyer and seller or whomever the signer may be, they're going to do, they're going to connect with our notary on the portal. Now, I will say this is going to be similar to if your clients are to use Notary Cam or any of the other Pavaso. There's a ton of providers that provide this secure platform for signing documents remotely and online. We're seeing backshots, screenshots of our portal, which again is the same process, but it's just allowing you to see behind the scene what it looks like for a buyer or seller when they go into the portal to conduct this closing. So the first thing they're going to do, they're going to connect with the notary. You see there on the screen, you see a buyer, you see two sellers, and you see the notary. All right, and you see the document before them that they are signing. Now, once they join in, they're going to use again their computer or a mobile device, right? And they'll be speaking directly with the notary, right? It's not going to be typing communication. It'll be, again, remember I said it's two-way. So their device has to have the ability for video and audio communication. The second important step is verifying identity. We're going to get into this a little bit more in later slides about this step, because this is one of the main hurdles to an individual utilizing RON for signing. So using the portal, the notary is going to instruct the buyer or the seller to submit images of their photo ID, right? So they need to be able to take their photo ID, place it in front of the camera so that an image of that photo ID can be taken. It's going to compare it the same way we would do in person. We're going to take that and compare the photo ID to the person that we see on the screen. That's step one. There's a two-part identification process. Step one is to place their ID in front of the screen. Step two is for the party to answer questions. We call it knowledge-based authentication, or you call it knowledge-based questions. These are questions about your signer's credit history that no one else should be able to sign. So for example, when you go and get your credit report, it's those type of questions that will be asked in order for the signer, be it the buyer or the seller, to proceed with the RON closing. Assuming that the buyer or seller has successfully overcome that major hurdle, then they're going to adopt a signature. And so that signature is going to be, how are you intending to sign? It could be the way we use DocuSign. How do you want it to look? You want it to be, this type of calligraphy or signature, or however script, whatever they would like, they would adopt that signature. And then they're going to begin signing the documents electronically via a click. Again, similar to DocuSign. The signing portion is the easiest part. The most difficult part about the process are those first two requirements, right? The computer, remember, the seller, buyer, whomever the signer may be, because this is not just for buyers and sellers. Obviously, we're talking about buyers and sellers in the context of our discussion today because we're on real estate, but many parties use this remote online signing capability for just a number of documents, any documents that require notarization that the statute allows for online notarization. I'm going to give you that little caveat there. Since you came here for knowledge, here you can have it. Right now, still, there's a little bit of it's not widespread use. For example, for wills, trusts, those types of estate planning documents, there's not a widespread acceptance of online notarization for those documents. All right. So we're talking about online notarization in the context of real estate closings, right? So let's go back to the required equipment. The signer needs to have a computer, a tablet, an iPad, or mobile device with webcam and microphone. They got to be able to use this. And so sometimes, I'll be honest with you guys, we get, and it's not just a, mature person thing. I would assume some of you younger people can, the younger folks know how to utilize a computer, webcam, and microphone, but that's not always the case. So whether you're young or old, if you are proposing that your signer utilizes Ron, you gotta be sure that they're gonna know how to get on and engage a camera and a microphone. If they can't get past that hurdle, there will not be a Ron. All right, so let's be clear on that. The second important factor with regards to a Ron closing is the internet browser. The signer must be connected to a modern internet browser, which is Chrome, Firefox, Safari, also Microsoft Edge is a new one. And for iOS mobile devices, Safari is required. They have to be connected to a modern internet browser, right? And then outside of that, the connection must be stable. It has to be high speed, reliable. So if they're traveling, it cannot be, if they're on some island, it can't be dial up. It can't be anything that's slow, because if there's a break in the connection, the video will drop out and the closing will have to be rescheduled. And the fee for Ron is a bit higher, just again because of the technology and because the signing appointment has to be recorded and stored. That's another caveat. So the fee for Ron averages about $250, whereas you have the mobile notary can be $150. But again, there is a higher level of equipment that's needed and storage that's required as it relates to Ron. So that's another consideration when you're considering a Ron closing with your clients, the cost associated with it. Now, as it relates to the identity verification, remember, once we've gotten past the equipment, making sure that there is a stable connection and that there is two-way video and audio connection, there must be the ability to confirm identity. Remember, we talked about the signer having to hold up their ID. They're gonna hold up their state issued photo ID, such as a driver's license or passport. Similarly, if they were signing in person and they would have to provide an identification, they're going to need to provide that identification at the Ron closing. Now, let's talk about Florida. Know that the requirements to utilize Ron is different in every state. We're talking about Florida because we are in Florida, right? So note that not every notary can conduct Ron closings. That's a nugget. Someone that gets their notary stamp for in-person notaries, they can't just go and conduct a Ron closing. Only a specially trained and certified online notary public can perform online notarizations in Florida. A regular notary, or what I call a regular notary, has to take an additional course, take an additional exam, and get additional approval in order to obtain the license and certification to perform online notaries, because they're going to get a different notary seal even. We know that the notary that you obtain, obviously, I have mine here. It's a stamp, right? Like this is what you get when you are conducting the closing in person. When you become an online notary, the state of Florida is going to provide you with an electronic notary seal that is applied to the documents when a Ron closing is conducted, right? So that's important. Don't think because your cousin is a notary that they can go and conduct a Ron notary or signing. They cannot, because not every notary is trained and certified to conduct a Ron closing in Florida or signing in Florida, right? Here's the next consideration. We talked about the two-step authentication process, the credential analysis that was holding up the ID, and then the knowledge-based authentication. If the signer does not meet the requirements, then online notarization is not an option because the signer will not pass the identity verification. This is where we get into foreign signers, generally our sellers. If they cannot meet, one second, because I feel like I am hearing something. You guys make sure you mute. If you're a signer, okay. If you're a signer cannot meet these requirements that you see on the screen, they will not be able to sign using Ron. United States citizens or legal resident, at least in Florida, right? These are Florida specific requirements. A state issued driver's license, ID card or passport, a social security number, and at least 5 years, some say 3 to 5, but 5 years of credit history in the US. Understand that the credit is not pulled, but the history is used to generate the 5 knowledge-based questions to confirm the identity, right? So if you've ever asked this question of the closing agent, whether or not your signer can sign via Ron, they're going to ask you these questions as well as ask about equipment, because these are all requirements in order to be able to proceed with the Ron. Now you also see here, you can meet all of the top 3 requirements, but if your credit report is locked, you're not going to be able to answer the 5 knowledge-based questions. So you can be a US citizen, you can have the driver's license, you can have the social security number, but if your credit report is locked, the system is not going to be able to generate those 5 credit-based related questions for you. You know, they're going to ask you, which one of these addresses have you never lived at? Which one of these cars do you own? Which one of these banks have you never had a credit card with, right? And so those are questions that are pulled from a credit report. If the credit report is locked, signer will not be able to utilize Ron. So keep this in mind, again, as you're having conversations with your signers about the possibility to use Ron. So who can use Ron? Assuming that they've met all the prior requirements that we just discussed, can sellers utilize Ron? Generally, sellers are good to go. Generally, all seller closing documents can be executed electronically if all Ron requirements are met. They're pretty clear. Like they can sign all their documents utilizing Ron, assuming all the requirements are met. Right? Can buyers utilize Ron? With regards to finance transactions, in the case where a lender allows electronic signatures, generally the lender will still require wet signatures on critical loan documents. That's a caveat, such as the note, mortgage, and loan application. This is called a hybrid closing. So I say everyone's like, especially during COVID, this whole thing came out about Ron, and it was like everyone was all excited, but there's a huge caveat for our biggest closing package, right? The seller, as you guys have been to closing before, seller docs are in and out, right? We take maybe 20 minutes, maybe. It's the buyer's finance package that take the longest, but you come to find out that that entire package cannot be signed electronically. The critical loan docs must still be signed by a wet signature. And that is the note, mortgage, the loan application, and a number of other documents that they must have in their loan file as it stands right now. Now, as legislation changes, which you will see change, you may begin to see more and more documents, including the note and mortgage signed electronically. But as of right now, in a finance transaction, it's important to understand this, the buyer will not sign their entire loan package electronically. It's not happening. They're doing a hybrid, which is a great benefit, again, because it cuts our time in half. But as of right now, the entire loan package is not being signed electronically in a finance transaction. Now, with the cash transaction, like the sellers, generally all buyer closing documents can be executed electronically if Ron requirements are met. So we talked about sellers being able to sign electronically, assuming all requirements are met. Buyers, if it's a cash transaction, they can sign all documents electronically, assuming all Ron requirements are met. In a finance transaction, they are generally not signing all their documents electronically, because lenders still require the note, mortgage, loan application, and other critical loan documents to be signed via a wet signature. Okay. Now, here are some special considerations in relation to Ron. We've gotten past, okay, here are the requirements. We've gotten past, we understand that the seller can sign they're meeting all the requirements. But also, Ron is still new. There's still some slight concern about the validity of the documents, the enforceability of the documents, and whether or not the Ron signing is going to be conducted properly. As such, some title underwriters require prior approval as well as lenders. They require, and the buyer may require prior approval before Ron is utilized. What does that mean? That means the closing agent's title insurance provider this month they just had an issue with the bad Ron signing. We're not accepting Ron. We're past COVID now. We don't really see the reason for it. They need to come into the office or otherwise utilize an in-person notary, right? So you want to always get prior approval that Ron will be okay. You don't want to come up on, God forbid, the day before closing, not to mention, or a few days before closing and say, hey, we need Ron. You might not be able to utilize Ron in your transaction. So you want to make sure that you have that conversation in advance with the closing agent. Here's another consideration. You might not want to, maybe it's the cost. Maybe you're concerned about your seller being able to function with the equipment. That's honestly always my concern. I'm like, are they going to be able to get on and, log in where they need to be at the time that they need to be, make sure that their camera is on, that their video and their microphone is on, and we don't blow this signing appointment. If there's any concerns about that, just have your sellers pre-sign. That's always an option. Have them come into the office, pre-sign their documents, and they can sail away on their vacation, right? Now, specifically, if it is seller representation, for example, if you're working with a closing attorney, because only an attorney can provide seller representation separately from the closing, that's a separate conversation. If the seller has seller representation by an attorney, then the seller can have a power of attorney executed with their closing documents when they pre-sign, so that if any other closing documents come up that require signature, the attorney can go ahead and sign on the seller's behalf. So again, if you know your seller's not going to be available, a good rule of thumb is just have them pre-sign their documents, because you don't want there to be an issue with Ron that you can't overcome quickly. I'll put it that way, right? Now, outside of pre-signing, let's say that they've already taken that trip. They're gone. You didn't even know they, because that happens, right? It's like, oh, my sellers left. They didn't even tell me they were leaving. They just assume they will be able to sign their documents online because they saw something on, the news about all these electronic signings. What are we going to do? Well, consider a mail away or a mobile notary. What is a mail away? A mail away is when the documents for signature are literally, they're emailed. They're not generally mailed unless for some reason the sellers do not have access to a printer, but the documents are emailed to the seller. The seller will take them to a notary and have the documents executed before a notary and then mail back. Or a mobile notary, where we schedule a notary to go out and meet with your signers and sign the documents, right? So that's another alternative to Ron. So we're signing via Ron if it's available. And I would highly suggest that you guys that be the last resort. Let that be the last resort, because we've talked about the different hurdles and requirements that must be met, which you don't have to deal with if they just sign in person via pre-signing, mail away, mobile notary. And keep in mind that for buyers with a finance transaction, do not assume that they can sign electronically, because they cannot. And as a matter of fact, there's only a handful of lenders right now that are even doing the hybrid closing. Most of your finance transactions are going to require a wet signature on every single lender document for your buyers. All right. Listen, we got that done in a half hour. You guys didn't notice. I've been trying to keep them half hour. Get in, get you the information, get your questions answered on your lunch break, and get you back out. So, any questions? Do we have any questions about that? I know we had some people to come in late. For those who've been on from the beginning of the call, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. I'll answer those. For those who came in late and you had specific questions, or maybe I mentioned something at the end that you have question about, you can drop that in. Will you send us the recording? Yes, the recording will go out. Most of our recordings now, with the exception of one, is up on our YouTube channel. So you can, an email will go out in about 24 hours with a link to this recording, which is posted on our YouTube channel. And so you can access it there, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel where you should get notification when the videos are posted each week. That's a good question. We had a question about the cryptocurrency class. That one is actually posted to our website as well. We have a page specifically on cryptocurrency there. For next week, speaking of recordings, just so you guys know, when you'll see this in the email, next week, yep, had a seller try to sign using Ron but failed to answer the question to qualify. Exactly. Listen, guys, I'm telling you, this is not, everyone's like, oh, we'll just do Ron. Ron is the last resort. That is the last resort. You are really rolling the dice that they're going to be able to get it done. That's right, Paris. Good to see you again. You're welcome. Yes, you guys, listen, please don't anticipate, don't plan for Ron. It's not terrible. Again, we're here. We have the capability. We're able to offer the service when you need it. We just suggest, because again, you are relying on your clients being able to facilitate this. The computers, and this is unfortunate. I mean, they got through one of the harder parts. They couldn't answer the questions. And we have no control of that. They are randomly generated questions that the signers have to be able to answer. So thanks so much for sharing that, Ruth. That's an unfortunate circumstance, but I'm glad that you affirmed that it can happen. And so again, you guys, consider pre-signing, consider mobile notary, consider even just finding their own notary. And as a last resort, Ron is available if they meet the requirements, and we are here to service your clients with that need. Any more questions? Again, I don't expect you guys to be an expert in this because you're not facilitating the Ron, but when you get ready to have the conversations with your signers, you got to be able to explain to them these different requirements for Ron. All right, so look, there looks like there are no more questions. The next topic, Richard, good point, because I was saying that. I'm going to teach next week one of the first classes we taught, which unfortunately was not recorded, and I keep getting emails for it, and that is anatomy of a transaction. We're going to do anatomy of a transaction, which is you're under contract, now what, right? You've listed the property, you've gotten it under contract, you send it to the title agent. Now, what am I supposed to be doing? What should I be doing as the buyer's agent, or what should I be doing as the seller's agent on the way to the closing table? That's next week's conversation. I always love that topic because that's truly very much the nuts and bolts of your contract to closing process. Ms. Hayes, yes, you will receive a recording. An email should go out within 24 hours, sending you a link to the recording, as well as it'll be posted on our YouTube channel. Yes, I'm glad, Paris. Exactly. Most don't know that there are restrictions, right? And so again, I always say, where it was like, oh, what about Ron? It was like a hurry up, and it was like a false start. It was like a false start for the most important package, which is the buyer's package. It was 150 pages. Ron was a false start for that because you cannot sign every document via Ron, only a portion of the documents. And again, the lender actually even is facilitating for the buyer. That's something else for you to know. As of right now, we haven't had a package sent to us where we facilitate the portion of the electronically signed documents for the lender. The lender has their own portal for that, right? So we do facilitate the cash buyer signings, but the lender signings, they're going to log into the lender's portal. They're going to sign the lender's documents that are allowed to be signed electronically. And then we receive an email with the balance of the documents that require a wet signature. Any other questions? Is there a discounted rate for RON pertaining to buyers? There is no discounted rate. It's a flat fee for all the closings. Again, because the security and the storage protocol does not change. That's what costs the money. For RON, you have to record the signing appointment, and it has to be kept. Same way you have record keeping requirements, it has to be recorded. So that's where the cost comes in. Right. All right, guys. I'll see you guys next week. Get some rest, get some listings, get some stuff under contract, and we'll see you at the closing table. Bye-bye.